Welcome to the ADHD Open Space Podcast. My name is Gray Miller, and I will be your host and facilitator as we explore ideas, workarounds, accommodations, and other aspects of being a professional adult with ADHD. Most of this will come from my perspective as a cis white male in his mid-50s, living in the Midwest, who found out a year ago that I've been living with ADHD my entire life. I am not an expert on ADHD, except maybe in not knowing I've had it for half a century and somehow still getting by. But I promise to cite my sources, or at least admit when I'm repeating something I read on the interwebs. If I say anything you don't agree with, you're welcome to call me on it and let me know. This podcast is also part of the lead-up into the first ADHD Open Space happening in Madison, Wisconsin on January 20th, 2024. You can learn more about that event both here in the show and at the website adhdopen.space. The first 30 episodes of this podcast are also being released as part of National Podcast Host Month, NaPodPoMo. That means things might get a little rough, but it's going to be fun. Kind of like ADHD, right? Enjoy the show.
Okay, we are back. And I decided I was going to do a long-term demonstration of the phenomenon known as ADHD paralysis, task paralysis, and have been meaning to do another podcast for a couple of months now, and somehow just never got around to it. But thanks to my friend Greg, the creator of the Creative Work Hour podcast, and also Gretchen Shepard, who has a fantastic YouTube channel where she does art. Inspired by them, I am back in the saddle. And it's funny because there are two difficult things about making podcasts. One is coming up with content like a script, and two is editing. Now, I write a lot. You can find most of my stuff at graymiller.medium.com, but you can find me in other places too, and I'm writing all the time. So I've got the content, and I've even write in a conversational manner, so you'd think that I would do podcasts too. No problem, right? And as for editing, well, I have a simple solution to that, which is that I just don't really edit. I do run it through a sound improver, so you can have a better voice here. But for the most part, I use a really cheap, free thing called Audacity. I have used more expensive stuff like Hindenburg and stuff, and I've just found that really for what I do, that stuff isn't necessary. So I am going to try and get back here at least to a bi-weekly podcast. So we'll see if we can hold it to that. One thing that would hold me to that would be if you let me know that you heard this one. So send me a quick email, gray@adhdopen.space. And just let me know if you heard it. You didn't have to say you like it. In fact, if you don't like it, tell me that too. I will send you a button that says, fine, make your own podcast. But I'm going to read what turned out to be a very successful article on Medium. I was very surprised at how popular and how much it resonated with people. But here's an article called The Axioms of ADHD. The lessons learned in 3 years of studying my own ADHD. Now, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, an axiom is a, quote, statement or proposition which is regarded as being established, accepted, or self-evidently true, and from which other statements can be derived. For the past few months, I've been writing down things that help me function with ADHD. These were short phrases, kind of like mantras. Hurrying is kryptonite. Nothing is on the way to anything else. Choice is friction. I started calling this list my rules of ADHD, and I planned to write them up, but by the time I got to number 16, I realized that would make for a pretty complicated article. And who's going to remember 16 different rules, especially when there's likely to be even more? But I'm lucky enough to be friends with Amber Beckett from the Hello Code, and she suggested I look for overarching themes, groupings that might simplify these rules into basic concepts from which the rules could be extrapolated to fit different ADHD experiences. And after a bit of searching, I discovered there's a word for that, axiom. And of course, there was the obligatory, well, if you don't know, why don't you axiom? Joke. Hey, I'm a grandpa. You don't get dad jokes here, you get grandpa jokes here. The following 6 axioms of ADHD emerged. Number 1, the shortest one, the axiom of stuff. You find out where things want to live and then help them return there. That's really all there is to keeping track of everything. Your items don't get lost on purpose, nor does the universe try to hide them from you. Your cat tries to hide things from you, but the universe is on your side. In fact, things try to get back where they belong. So a simple way to think of this is that when you're missing something and you can't find it, say, where is it usually? That's probably pretty close to where it should live, and so make a home for it there and make it welcome. I know I'm kind of channeling Marie Kondo there. So this first axiom, it's the simplest one, because if you can keep it top of mind, it makes everything else a lot easier. Number 2, the axiom of transitions. Liminal spaces are dangerous. Now this one started out because the hurrying is kryptonite. And if you'd like, if you're a math nerd, I did make it into a supremely mathematical framework. The speed at which you transition from one place to another is directly proportional to the likelihood that you will forget something and the relative importance of the thing or things you will forget. See, our ADHD brains are great at getting into flow on any given task that they're interested in, but moving from one place to another is so difficult that it has its own separate executive function, known as task switching or cognitive flexibility. Flexibility is a great way to think of it because we tend to understand the idea that the way to maintain physical flexibility is to do things like drinking water, yoga, or warming up before doing something strenuous. And we also understand that all bodies are different, and things like age, genetics, stress, nutrition, and medications all makes a difference in our capabilities. So it's easy to draw parallels between these physical concepts and the ways that our ADHD brains can build up and maintain our cognitive flexibility. Meditation does for your brain what water does for your joints. Journaling does for your brain what yoga does for your body. Checklists and rituals do for your brain what warm-ups and cool-downs do for your body. And you don't even have to make parallels for the rest of it. How much sleep you get, whether your parents had ADHD, how stressed you are, the kind of food you eat, whether or not you take meds, it's all directly relevant to how well you handle shifting activities, locations, or focus. Hurrying is kryptonite. Next is the axiom of magical thinking. Your brain sees the world through a kaleidoscope, vivid, shifting, and full of possibility. Took me a really long time to come up with that framework, by the way, because this one basically was coming out to your brain is an idiot. My brain is anyway. But here's the thing. When your brain sees the world through a kaleidoscope that is vivid, shifting, and full of possibility, it is usually not aligned with reality. Whatever amount of time your brain estimates, it's wrong. That task is going to take longer than you think. That deadline is going to happen sooner than you think. And if you don't leave early for the appointment, you'll be late. When it comes to trying to estimate any kind of capacity, from time to energy to attention, your brain is kind of like your brother-in-law talking about cryptocurrency. Wildly optimistic, totally unrealistic, and desperate to be right. There is one very effective way to counter most of the time-related troubles with this particular axiom. No side quests. See, if you find yourself thinking, oh, on the way to this appointment, I can just stop at this other place and quick do that thing, you will be late. Actually, I'm going to break away from the article for a second and say that in preparation for this podcast, I ran into a beautiful example of this particular thing. You see, I'm using my fancy Yeti microphone, which takes a different USB cable than my normal microphone, and I didn't have it upstairs. It was downstairs in my workshop. So I thought, I'll go downstairs and do it in a workshop. And then I noticed that I had put my laundry on my chair because I wanted to remember to do it. I thought, oh, hey, while I'm down there looking for the cable, I'll just throw my laundry in. Now, this is exactly what I said. On my way to getting the cable, I will toss in my laundry. I said something was going to be on the way to something else. So you know what I did? I brought my laundry downstairs. I carefully went through the pockets to make sure that there was nothing in them. I put the laundry in the washing machine, started the washing machine, set an alarm for 60 minutes. I even named the alarm, which was change the laundry, and then walked right back upstairs. You may, if you've been paying attention, notice the missing ingredient to this, which was I did not get the cable. So I turned around and went back downstairs and got the cable. So that's exactly what happens. Nothing is on the way to something else because it will derail it. It's kind of like monotasking. I know if you're like me and most of my ADHD friends, you hate that word. But it's monotasking for GPS. You need to program a destination into your brain, and that's the only place you go or thing you do until you deliberately choose something else. Now, this doesn't mean you can't do lots of things. You just need to turn the side quest into a quest. So, for example, I'm a member of a local makerspace, and one Sunday I had a 3D print that was running overnight. And the natural thing to think would be, oh, I'll just pick this up on our way to work in the morning. I was being driven to work by my partner. And then, here's the thing, nothing is on the way to anything else. Now, I did make sure that we left 15 minutes early, and I deliberately stopped at the makerspace to run in and pick the print. So that changed it from, I'll pick it up on the way to, I'm going to go to the makerspace and pick up the print. And then at the makerspace, I'm now going to go to work. It worked flawlessly. And it had a side benefit because we were a little rushed to get out the door 15 minutes early, and I forgot to take my ADHD meds. And I realized this on our way to the makerspace, which is only about 5 minutes from my house, which meant we had time for my partner to drop me at the makerspace and then run home, get my pill, and then pick me up as I was coming out of the door with my 3D print in hand. Now, I should note that my partner and I both have ADHD, and neither of us remembered that she had gone to get the pill until after she had dropped me off and driven away. But she turned around and came back and gave it to me. But, we take the victories that we can, and ADHD never goes away. Intentionality is your battle cry for this particular axiom. Plan what you're going to do, and then do it, and then evaluate what to do next. By planning it, there's a greater chance you'll give yourself enough time. Here's one that I really hate. The axiom of options. Choice is friction. ADHD brain is really good at coming up with plans. Plan B, bah. By the time a normal brain has come up with a B, we're already at Q.7 beta. But that makes ADHD brains especially prone to both decision fatigue and choice paralysis. It creates a friction at every decision point, not because we're trying to figure out the best option, but usually because we're trying to figure out the best metric to use to find the best option. Is it the fastest, the most robust, the cheapest, the most fun, the most secure? Ask any engineer and they'll say that friction is not only useful, it's necessary until it's not. See, if you're stuck, you may have too many choices. And if you continually get slowed down at a particular decision point, you almost certainly have too many. So this leads to the corollary of the task list, which at first seems like the solution to your leaky memory. Unfortunately, while a brain dump is useful, you end up with a huge task list and the difficulty in choosing what to do first. Here's a potentially useful ritual for working out the task list. Number 1, pick out the tasks you want to do today. Number 2, now put some back. Some of those tasks would be grateful to have more time devoted to them. And the ones you move back to the brain dump will also benefit from more time. Number 3, nope, take away more. Magical thinking is not your friend. Keep culling those tasks. Step 4, nope, still too many. Step 5, okay, just pick one out of what's left and we'll hope for the best. This is a little bit of a reference to the classic Pick Your Battles meme, which you should definitely look up if you don't already know about it. Here's one I kind of enjoy called the CRASH axiom, and CRASH is an acronym. And this can be summarized by saying that everything works until it doesn't. It's possibly the most frustrating thing about ADHD. It's the apocalyptic effect of hedonic adaptation. That's the completely common phenomenon both in humans and ADHDers, as I would say, both in neurotypical humans and neurodivergent humans. Just something about our nervous system that makes something interesting and enjoyable when it's new, but the more you do it, the less interesting and enjoyable it becomes. Now, for a neurotypical brain, this is a mild annoyance. They can still keep doing the thing even if it isn't new and even if it isn't interesting. But for brains like ours, ADHD brains that rely on interest and novelty to function, it means there is an endless cycle that goes something like this. We find something new that helps us with our ADHD. We invest time, money, energy, and attention to get it just right, such as laying out a bullet journal, installing a new app, buying a new device, signing up for another class. And then it works great until it doesn't, at which point we start looking for something else and go back to step one. Now, often this is accompanied by feelings of shame, failure, and hopelessness, perhaps even exacerbated by people around you who don't understand why this thing that you were so excited about last week is now gathering dust on your shelf. Now, there's 3 words to remember when you feel that way. It's not your fault. Everything works until it doesn't. It's true for neurotypical brains too. People go through different phases of life and activities, and the systems they use for each change. A person rarely uses the same tools that helped them in college when they're in their first job. And often any new job means a new system to learn and adapt to. And that, dare I say it, is the ADHD superpower. Switching from Meta to Google? No problem. Workplace to Slack? Got it. Changing payroll systems, phone lines, email addresses? Changes the air we breathe every day. Bring it on! And that means that we will likely never be one system to rule them all. I'm sorry, Notion, Obsidian, The Brain, Second Brain, Craft, Upnote, Apple Notes, Evernote, GoodNotes, Notability, Affine, Capacities, Para, Bujo, Cujo, Dujo. All of them are lovely systems that work for lots of people, including me, for a while. Then they start to get harder to maintain. Harder to pull out at the meeting, much less to write in at the end of the day. Eventually, the app's bar is barely noticeable in your screen time stats, and then you lose track of some appointment, some data point, some file that the system was supposed to keep from happening, and then you discover that, where the leak is, the point at which the information was lost, the appointment not made, the object not put in the place where it belonged, you calmly find a way to reduce the chance of it happening again. That's being cognitively responsible. It's saying, yes, my brain is like this, and I'm always finding new ways to help it work better. That's the CR of crash. And the other part of it, though, is remembering that your brain is like this. And so far, we are only really issued one brain per life. So while you can find ways to externalize executive function and cognitively offload things and change your environment, you're still going to have a brain with ADHD. You're going to be, well, I'll say this for the delicate ears that might be listening right now, cognitively responsible and aware stuff happens. Crash. Now, the final axiom is your brain is beautiful. Now that we've talked about all the ways your brain doesn't work very well, let me turn it all around on you. There's nothing wrong with your brain. Nothing. It only works. Not only does it work exactly the way it should, it has, to quote Liam Neeson, a particular set of skills. Boy, that was a terrible Liam Neeson impression. Sorry about that. It has a particular set of skills that make it able to do things that most brains can't. Now, if that seems hard to accept, I get it. I'm still wrapping my head around it myself. But here's the thing. You know how there are all those examples of people with ADHD who succeeded? They all had one thing in common. They changed their environment and their goals to fit their brains. Or if they were really lucky, They had help doing it from parents, teachers, friends, or partners. The ways they changed their environment varied, of course. Some found a way to take medication. Others created the time to have meditation. Some used sticky notes, others Pomodoro timers. They either found jobs that fit their brains or convinced the jobs that didn't to make accommodations, or created bespoke careers that might not even have existed before, but that created enough value in society that they could put food on the table and a roof over their head. Now, this is where it's tempting to jump on the ADHD is only a problem because of capitalism bandwagon. But that's probably both too simplistic and too controversial to just throw up there. And besides, it's capitalism is really the only game in town as far as my experience goes, so how could I know? But what I do know is that about 3 years ago, when I finally began to understand how my brain actually works, a few things that had been happening for the previous 5 decades of my life stopped. I stopped wondering why it felt like everyone else had been given a how to adult manual except me. I stopped believing the eternal drone of, you have such great potential, Gray, if only you'd apply yourself. I stopped feeling guilty for my constant desire for learning, reading, music, or other forms of stimulation, alongside mundane tasks like spreadsheets or laundry. I stopped feeling guilty when some recent subject or hobby I'd been totally obsessed with for a couple of weeks or months or years suddenly seemed completely boring. I stopped telling myself I just needed to try harder to remember things, or just know when it's time to leave, time to sleep, time to anything. The list goes on, and everyone who has dealt with ADHD, especially late diagnosed, could add a few dozen more. Thanks to my understanding my brain, my ADHD brain better, every area of my life, career, relationships, health, finances, writing, hobbies, has improved. And it feels weird, because I'm used to struggling with these things, with self-recrimination and depression and despair in all those areas. I still have those things at various times, but on the whole, things are much easier. And easy? Not something I'm used to. My brain is beautiful. That's the final axiom, and I wish we could all say it enough that we might actually believe it. As I mentioned, I'm only starting to feel that way. But the things that my brain does well, hyperfocus, generating ideas, problem solving, finding the gaps between things and filling them in, I've learned to celebrate them, even lean into them, and once or twice even leverage them into things that qualify as successes, even in this late-stage capitalist world we live in. And yes, there is also a part of me that really feels guilty and really resents that I've reached a point in my life where I finally feel like I'm figuring it all out, and the rest of the world seems to be hell-bent for the apocalypse. But there it is. So again, that final axiom is that your brain is beautiful too. It's the one that brings everything else together. It's the one that both lets you endure the way the world is not designed for the way your brain works, and also the ways that your brain really is a magical time-traveling, world-creating Gestaltkunstwerk. Of course, you're human, so not everything that goes wrong in your life can be blamed on ADHD. But especially if you're or late diagnosed, it's probably more than you think. Your brain is just trying to exist in a strange and foreign land, doing the best it can to get you what you need and what you want. And if you can learn to work with that idea rather than against it, you've got it made.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the ADHD Open Space Podcast. Again, my name is Gray Miller. If you have any comments or questions about the show, you can feel free to leave them on the podcast page, or you can email me directly, Gray, Gray, at adhdopen.space. The background music for the intro and outro are from pixabay.com and are called Funny Days Together by Background Music Lab, used under a YouTube Content ID license.